All right. Good morning from Auckland, New Zealand. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi.
Hey. And so today we're having a little chat about a topic that I've been wanting to address for quite some time, which is the topic of what is a millennial? Who are millennials? It's something that I've been intrigued about, and Chelsea is a friend of mine. We are in the business together, and we often have a little chats via Messenger, random chats. And this topic came up, Chelsea, a few months ago, I think, didn't it?
Yeah, about 2-3 months ago.
Yeah, I think I was making a very general statement about millennials being people that don't have the attention span to read a full blog, hence I shouldn't write a full blog, and you kindly corrected me.
Yeah. No, it was a funny conversation. I remember that.
So maybe I'll ask you that question again. But I thought we'd start with first answering what is a millennial before we get into the deep stuff.
All right. So a millennial is it's a descriptive word for a generation. And I should preface here that generational theory is it's all theory. It's almost like horoscopes. We can do studies on these people and demographics, of course, but it's all theory. It's not set in stone. So a millennial is just like the baby boomers and Gen X and Gen Z. Millennials are born after 1981. And then the cutoff, it varies when they say, depending on what source you're reading. But the cutoff is anywhere from 1996 to 2000. Okay. So there's a good 10 years or so of time in there. And yeah, they're all about in their 20s now. And I classify myself as one of them.
Okay, cool. So when you say cutoff is 1996 to 2000, that's when the generation ends?
Well, yeah. So obviously it's hard to say someone is one thing and then as soon as they're born a second after, they're no longer that thing, because we're going to have a very similar upbringing and very similar principles, but it's just a way of dividing people up and making things easier. So yeah, it's 1996 to 2000, and as we get older and the years go on, the definition for millennials will be more set in stone.
Cool. And as I was saying before we hit record, I made the cut and I didn't even realize. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for explaining that. So what's the significant theme at the moment for millennials, do you think?
Well, I think generally millennials are being talked about a lot at this point in time because of our age and where we're at in our development as an adult and our impact in the world, and we're starting to get full-time jobs, and people sort of have this whole theme about millennials being lazy and entitled, very, very different ways of thinking. Like people refer to them as soft and just, I mean, they could be seen as negative terms, but they're really talked about generation because they're so different, and every generation has been different, and it's important now that we understand who millennials are and what sort of things they bring to play, because we are in a position now where we are key consumers and key voters. Okay. So yeah.
Okay, cool. What was going to be my next question? What do they struggle with?
I think millennials struggle. Oh, that's such a broad.
Yeah.
So again, like personal opinion, and obviously every socioeconomic demographic will be different, especially culturally. But in terms of like a Western millennial, I think they struggle with the labels that society puts on them that I just spoke about, because obviously we're fronting up in the world with those as a preset. And then, we also have this new theme around consumer culture, which is relatively new, and it's due to the amount of options as consumers that we have available. And once you have so many hundreds of thousands of options to buy one thing, in the past, you would have had 6 colors or 6 colorways. Now we have 1,000 iPhone cases to choose from. That's a really bad example, but consumer culture is basically this sense that we form our own identity based on what we purchase, because there is so much choice that every choice we make is a statement to others. And so that's been really interesting to watch play out, because this is the first generation that's really had so much consumer culture forced upon them. Obviously, we've always had advertising, but again, it's more consumer culture is, and identity is more about the choices that you have and how many and how overwhelming they are, and things like brand loyalty is important to us. But yeah, other than that, we also have a very different way of thinking, and a lot of us have a different way of wanting to show up in the world in terms of working. I'm sure you've seen lots of viral videos about us wanting to take mental health days and wanting to come in late and wanting to do things our way. So, we're struggling to adjust to the world. I think some of us are, yeah.
Okay. And when you talk about millennials in this way, do you predominantly mean in the Western society? I guess we don't really, or do we know much about other cultures and how this presents in other cultures?
Yeah, so it's all still being studied, just like, to an extent, baby boomers are still being studied to this day. We do have little bits of information about other cultures, but it's all being collected as we speak. So we know mostly about Western cultures just because that's where people like to, I guess, absorb and research. But yeah, not that I can think of off the top of my head. I have studied a course in sociology, which is where I pull a lot of my generational theory that I know of from. But it was mainly focused on similar socioeconomic groups, unfortunately.
Okay. And what is it that you're studying now? We didn't mention that, so
I'm in uni at the moment, and I'm studying public relations and communications. But within that, I study things like new communication tech, sociology, and consumer psychology, and things of that nature.
So do you find that there's many millennials in these kind of courses? Are there any mature age students in these kind of courses, or?
Yes, being an undergrad, it's mostly, it's actually more Generation Z, come to think of it, or Generation Z, or otherwise known as Centennials.
Oh my goodness, what are these?
It's the generation, the newer generation, sorry, I don't know what I'm saying. They're younger than me.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're mostly in these courses, and it's interesting to watch, but there isn't a lot of mature age people, but that could also be said for most undergrad degrees. There's not always a lot of mature age people doing bachelors anymore.
Cool. So I'm not going to ask you about Generation Z. We'll try and stay on the topic. Cool.
Yeah.
But it is a bit intriguing, to watch the unfoldings of each generation. So earlier you said something about these kind of preconceived ideas about millennials being forced upon them. Do you mean by their parents? Do you mean by culture? What do you mean? Can you be a bit more specific around that?
It's definitely, in my opinion, more about the culture, especially now that we have the internet. And not only did we grow up in the technology age, which means a whole lot of different things and explains a lot of why we are the way we are, it's more that we see that circulated by society, online, by adults. Parents, I don't really think played a huge role in endorsing these sorts of negative traits, although a lot of people argue that we are the generation of participation awards, which was, gifted to us and by our parental generation, even though it's by teachers and schools and institutions. Right. It's still our parents' generation. So there were elements of that at play, but again, I don't think it was their intention to create entitlement. It was just their reflection of their own upbringing and wanting to change that in a positive way. So,
Well, let's change it up a bit. What are the gifts that millennials bring to the table?
So I think, like every generation, millennials aren't, they're not entirely special, although we do need to take them into big consideration. Every generation brings its own gifts and struggles in very similar ways often. And I think the best thing is just having, fresh people on the planet with different perspectives. It's awesome that we have a generation now that has grown up in the digital age, because that means that, you know, we'll have so many more kids that are gifted with the ability to code, and, you know, new industries being created like gaming and YouTubing, and social media management has become a massive, massive multi-million-dollar industry for businesses that already exist, with very basic services that have nothing to do with online services, but they need online services to plug them into the world. So that, you know, we're incredibly generally flexible, and sometimes that can look like laziness or you know, not dedicated enough, but we're flexible. We know a lot about the online world. We have varied interests, just like every generation. And we also have grown up in a very interesting time politically. I know, especially in Australia, we haven't seen many prime ministers hold their term, especially recently.
Yeah.
So, you know, we sort of, I think, have this interesting, I guess you could say, like, distrust with authority at the moment, just because of the way things are in Australia.
Right.
But yeah, having all that and having a fresh perspective is always a gift to society, in my opinion.
Great. Yeah, no, what's up with the politics? I've been out of Australia for quite a few years, but there's been a change of Prime Minister again the last month or two. I don't follow politics, but...
Yes. Yeah, there has been. There's been a lot. It's been very hectic, and it's just swinging, you know, just the pendulum swings, and people keep leaving office early. I mean, it's hard to describe. There's always different reasons and different factors. But it does create a fair amount of instability and distrust from especially people that have grown up knowing no different. Because obviously we were only, and I'm saying, you know, obviously when we were babies, it's a different story, but most of us as teenagers who are aware of politics have been just watching this mess unfold. And it's causing distrust everywhere in every generation, but when you have that as a foundational belief, well, it will disrupt your whole worldview on politics, 100%.
Fair enough. It's interesting. I didn't plan to ask about politics, so it's interesting that we've weaved that into the conversation. But very interesting. Maybe everyone needs to move to New Zealand. We've got a female Prime Minister.
New Zealand or Canada.
Yeah. Although I'm moving out. What could the rest of the world do to better understand the millennial journey then? Very broad question.
I think that's such a good question. It's so hard. Obviously, get them in your life and just talk to them. Every millennial is different, and I don't mean to speak for everyone, obviously, but based on my opinion, you know, get out there, talk to them, understand that they've grown up in a completely different time. I think one of the most enlightening conversations I had with, I believe he was a baby boomer, was just the idea that, you know, there's such a different dynamic in our society now because of the information age. Once kids grow up with the likes of Google, you know, we're going to turn to Google versus actually talking to an elder in our community per se. And so a lot of the time kids trust what the internet will have to say over a faulty source, someone that is human and has human error and doesn't remember things entirely properly, you know what I mean? So we always have this wanting to go back to the internet to find information instead of looking upwards and sort of learning more practically. So they're very hard to understand. You just have to know that, like, in the sense that every generation is so different. We've grown up with the internet, which is just huge. Like, I keep saying the internet, but like, it is a really big deal to grow up with and be exposed to so much so early in your life, because the internet shows you a lot of things that you maybe shouldn't see until you're 20.
Totally. I mean, all the techno dudes like Steve Jobs and that, they didn't let their children really play with technology until they were much older.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, but on the positive, like, I have an 85-year-old grandmother on the other side of the planet in a country, like, you know, that's been corrupt by a war. And she's just lost her husband and her whole family lives across the world. No one is there. and she's just got on Facebook. Like, how amazing is that to actually feel, even though she's quite isolated, I mean, she has her local community, but her family's all across the world. Yet she's able to send me, I mean, she still doesn't understand the tagging and all the technical stuff, but my 85-year-old grandmother is like liking my photos, and, you know, that's just something.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's definitely a gift. It's more so that, you know, when you grow up in it, it creates a very different human being, which is scary. But yeah, no, it's super amazing technology. We're so lucky.
Yeah, I mean, there's always two sides of a coin, isn't there? So I was going to ask you something else that you were talking about within that question, but it just slipped out because it was a broad.
That's all good.
That's all good. I've already asked that. How can we support? That's the same question. Okay. Do you have anything like that you'd like to add to this theme, or maybe answer my original question, like that actually sparked this curiosity and wanting to talk about this? So I think we were talking about blogs and the size of blogs, and my comment was, I can't write long ones if I'm wanting to attract the attention of millennials because they don't have the attention span. And you said something like, no, quite on the contrary. And what was the conversation?
There's definitely like a belief that like it's no lie that generally as human beings our attention span is shortening. They've done studies to find that in terms of entertainment, people will only click on a website for up to 1.5 seconds or something ridiculous, and they'll only watch videos for up to 6 seconds before flipping the channel or scrolling to the next video. So there's science backing that statistic up. But in the terms of, you know, generationally millennials not having time to read through blogs is completely just an assumption, because there are heaps of millennials that spend so much time on technology on their phones all day, and what do they do besides read? We absorb stuff that way. That's how we've traditionally absorbed stuff. And a lot of us are more than happy to sit down and kill time by just sitting and scrolling and reading. So the idea that because we're just younger that we have even worse attention spans than the average is, you know, not entirely true. And we do take joy in chilling out just like anyone else, and taking the time to dedicate to read something. So with millennials, it's always been this theme of like, you know, not only entitlement but also purpose. And so we'll do anything if it contributes to what we believe is our purpose in the world, or finding that purpose. So blogs are a part of that a lot of the time because they're about that sort of content. Yeah.
Great. And I guess it feeds into what you were saying earlier. Like if you've been growing up in the age of technology and screens, of course you're going to turn to the internet as opposed to a faulty human / otherwise known as elder. But how can
we get the tendency.
How can older people or elders reconnect with the millennial generation then and recreate that trust and the passing of wisdom? Is it very individual? Is it possible in your opinion? Do they do it through technology? How do they do it?
I don't think it needs to be done through technology. I think what's hard is that I'm not an elder in my community yet, but I don't know what it would be like to feel that my wisdom doesn't really mean squat to people that are younger than me. It would be interesting to be in that position, just to know how I would even reconnect as if I was them. But I think, you know, it's important now that we can't just rely on the connection to be about wisdom. There are, you know, our elders now could be baby boomers or even beyond that generation that still have very different worldviews, and so like when they conflict, it can be very confronting, and especially when you have someone that, you know, pretends to be the mouthpiece of all knowledge and wisdom on the planet because of their age. To connect with a young person, that is just not going to click, because a young person is going to just look at you and be like, yep, well, that's wrong and that's wrong and I don't agree and this is wasting my time. So I think it's about reconnecting in a way that isn't about trying to pass on knowledge in a
Mm.
traditional sense of like, oh, well, did you know that, birds have brains as small as their eyeballs? Like, just really useless piece or of trivial or opinionated information that can be done with actual connection. So, yeah.
I guess it goes back to really how do we connect with people, like no matter what generation, no matter what age, genuinely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, really. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
connection, yeah.
And you, I think I've seen you interviewed before. You run a big group on Facebook somewhere. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not going to say the name of the
No,
group, but
don't.
I've had a couple of people like stalk it down, and it's just a bit weird. But I'm on an admin team of admins and moderators on a Facebook group that is quite large. And I've been doing that I've been running similar groups for almost over a year and a half now, I think. And so I do that in my spare time, and it's all women. It's all around millennial age group,
Mhm.
thereabouts, and of course the centennials are
Mhm.
probably the majority of the group now. And yeah, it's just I've just been really into running support forums because that was something this is so ironic, but I didn't feel like I had a support forum even when I was on
Mm.
the internet growing up in school and high school, and I felt like if I had that, I would have been a very, very different person. So I now like to foster that for other people because
Right.
it can be a really great support network for young
Okay.
women.
Can you share, I mean, you don't have to disclose the group name, but can you share some of the themes that might pop up in a group like that, or is that confidential?
No, it's not confidential. Oh god, there are a lot of themes. It's basically, something anything you'd find in a 16-year-old girl's diary,
Right.
really. So, we don't really hold any bars. It's a free for all, really.
Yeah.
Obviously, we just don't allow illegal, recommendations or
Yeah.
activities to go on or be recommended. But we talk about relationships and dating, and we talk about safety and health, especially like every time there's Cancer Awareness Month or just general mental health help as
Mm.
well is a really big one, and life advice like financially,
Mm.
priority wise, career wise. So yeah, it's just like any day to day, really run of the mill topics that you would expect to find in a 16-year-old's diary. So yeah, and we sort of just let that all happen, and girls support each other as necessary and look to each other for support. And it's funny because we talk about, not being the mouthpiece of wisdom or pretending to be, but we'll take it on from other people our age
Mm.
online. But um, yeah, we also talk about politics in there, of course, because we can't ignore it. So there's just a whole range of topics in there, and it's awesome.
Beautiful. Well, it's nice to know that there is, yeah, a tool there to connect in the age of
Yeah,
technology and disconnection to some extent as well. So,
yeah.
um, and since we're both in the oils industry, essential oils industry, how do you, as a young millennial, use oils to support you in your millennial journey specifically?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. So a lot of millennials are known for being the anxious and depressed generation, having a
Right.
lot of issues with mental health, and that can be argued. We're getting to know more about mental health, and therefore we're finding more people to diagnose. We're finding that more people should be diagnosed and are
Right.
diagnosable, and therefore, but really it is a generational thing as well. We do have a lot of people that are affected by mental health issues much, much earlier on,
Mm-hmm.
where like factors are out of, I'm not going to say like
Yeah.
whether it's or the parents, it's none of my business,
Yeah.
but using essential oils is one of the best ways to support that mental health in particular
Mm.
for me. So I also have a lot of sensitivities that I came into the world with, and that was due to chemical overload, really, from lots of synthetics, lots of medicines, lots of drugs when I was a wee infant. And so, you know, and also just genetic dispositions, I guess. And so I've had to avoid a lot of products in my life, the products that everyone, you know, that whole consumer identity. I can't use typical skincare, or I can't use typical body wash, things like that. So I rely on natural remedies like essential oils to make my own products, to manage my mental health, to help me engage in the world better as someone with autism, or Asperger's. And socially, it can be quite difficult to function, especially when you have other issues. So essential oils have really brought me out of my shell and given me, you know, a passion as well, because it was hard for me, not like all throughout high school, not really knowing what I wanted to do, and not really caring too much for anything. And especially as millennials, we have so much intent driven down to find purpose and find a meaning of life, and find somewhere where we belong. There's a real sense of hunting for community, which is why I run online forums that create a community. There's a sense of not belonging in places because we grew up in a place so big, knowing that everyone is out there on the internet, but where do we fit in? You know, like we don't have cliques as much. We have social cliques, but we don't have gang identities and youth subcultures that are as strongly ingrained in law. We have a lot of neo-tribalism, which is just a fancy word for people that float in between and flex all around. So finding a community of oil users that also have similar upbringing, similar sensitivities, similar mental health issues that they're supporting, and health issues generally, has just been so comforting. And to like work with them and actually enjoy doing it, because I just find them so mesmerizing as little fairy potions. You know, I've always been really passionate about, you know, aromatherapy and that sort of thing. So it's really magical to me, and I think it's an amazing thing to support millennials in general. Just all the things that I mentioned, finding a community and supporting your mental health, 100%.
Absolutely. And I really do hope that some millennials do watch this video and can really benefit from what you're sharing as well about your journey. Can you be a bit more specific with, you talked about oils really supporting you with different mental health issues, some of the sensitivities. Do you have some favorites you could share for people so they can get an idea how you would use them? Like, would you use them, you know, in the food, or how do you do it?
So essential oils can be used a couple of different ways. For what I like to use them for in terms of mental health, I typically use them aromatically and topically. So aromatically is a fancy word for up your schnozzer, up your nose. Breathing them in, inhaling them.
Okay. Up your schnozzer.
And then, of course, topically is on your skin. And obviously the two go hand in hand. As soon as you put it on your skin, you're going to smell it. I have a couple of different jewelry pieces that I wear that have diffuser beadlets, which, you know, help diffuse the essential oil. And in terms of favorites, I cycle through so many. It really depends on what you're using it for, and also your personal constitution and makeup. You know, sometimes it's good to have something that reminds you of a certain memory of home or of childhood or of something like that. I tend to cycle through different restful and peaceful blends, depending on what I feel like. But overall, I've held fast pretty strong to just basic lemon essential oil, and I don't know why, but that has really helped me with certain attacks where you panic a lot. And
So what is lemon? So what do you do? Do you just like sniff it from the bottle, like if you're having a bit of a panic attack, or what would you do with it?
For me personally, panic attacks are different for everyone, but I don't have time to, like, I know there's a lot of different techniques with breathing and with counting down the things that you see and all your senses. I don't have time for that when I'm having a panic attack. I don't even remember that. I don't even think cohesively enough to really
Right.
out the room.
Right.
So the first thing I do, I don't put it on, I just snip it out the bottle. It is just like,
Totally.
it's right there. I just pull it out of my pocket and I'm just trying to center and come back to earth. And I just sit there however long it takes. And it generally has saved me a couple of times from being severely embarrassed at school.
Wow.
And so
Amazing.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I guess, like, essential oils work so quickly. Like, I mean, when we put them in our skin, doesn't it only take like 20 or 30 seconds for them to get into our bloodstream? So I'm guessing, well, I wouldn't remember to be breathing and counting when I'm having a little.
I respect, they're good methods. They do work for people who
Yeah,
have nothing
totally.
physical, but I'm a very physical person. So thinking my way out of a problem with my brain isn't going to help me. I need a physical stimulant to snap out of it. But yeah, they do work very quickly. I've had times where I've had an allergic reaction to peanuts, which is quite severe if you know anyone with anaphylaxis, and they've worked within literally 10 seconds.
Wow.
Not that I recommend using them as anaphylactic,
Yeah.
No, just don't. I don't recommend it, but I
It
didn't
worked
have
for
it.
you. It worked for you. Yeah. So we're not here to cure or prescribe.
No.
We're not doctors at all, but you're just sharing your experience. So
Yeah, they do work very quickly though, which is amazing.
Yeah, great. I don't really have a favorite. I'm very moody, so I'll just pick on the day, really. So yeah, like right now I've got spearmint, ylang ylang and litsea. That's my little blend. Thank you. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for opening up about your personal experience. I think with these conversations, it's really important connection point as well for all generations, really. And it just gives us a little bit more opportunity to understand the individual. And of course, you're just another person. You're not the representative of all millennials. Like you said, there's so many different millennials out there as well. And you're on the verge of, what's the other one called? You're in between, was it Zillennials? What was it? You're on the cusp, or
Centennials. I prefer Centennials to Gen Z because people say Gen Z and Gen Z. Just Centennials.
Centennials.
So Centennials because they're on the turn of the century. Technically, I am a centennial by 2 years, but I don't identify with the tropes of a centennial and studies of centennial because I am 2 years out. So really, I would class my upbringing and identify more with the millennial movement, which is that preferential and biased. I don't know, but that's just based on what I've researched. That's just how I feel, and it's 2 years. And again, generational theory is not it's not cookie cutter. You can't just tell someone that because they're born after June 1, 2000 that they're suddenly no longer part of that identity for one day's difference. So, centennials are really a completely different ball game in terms of their views, what they bring to the world, their strengths, their themes, all the things that we've been discussing. So it is interesting to look into, definitely.
What do you know, like, can you share a particular difference between millennials and centennials? Or is that a weird question?
So millennials, I only know a little bit based on what I've studied, and what I've studied is typically about politics in the sense of the difference between millennials and centennials. And the difference is that millennials came into the world super progressive, so very leftist ideals, centrist to leftist really, and all this depends on socioeconomic factors, who your parents were, how your family values were. But as a general, millennials are more progressive. Reason being, they had the internet to expose them to different people of different cultures and different ideals way earlier, so that they have this general idea of tolerance that some other generations may have skipped out on. And then the centennials, on the other hand, are much, much, much more conservative, which is super interesting because
it's weird.
You wouldn't think. But they're apparently going to be hypothesized to be, again, they're still 13 and below, but they're hypothesized to be the most no, they're not 13 and below. That's wrong. They're 18 and below. But you know what I mean? A lot of them, the bulk of them are about 13 now. They're hypothesized to be the most conservative generation since the silent generation. And the reason for that is also apparently due to internet culture, the fact that they've been exposed to so much in terms of wars of terror and just terrorist acts and
Wow.
fear-mongering news and fake news. And so they're a lot more skeptical, a lot more distrust in government and authority in general, which isn't conservative, but just a general conservative nature apparently. So millennials and centennials, it's always like an intergenerational clash between the two closest generations, typically. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Whether or not that hypothesis is true we have no idea. Personally, I don't see how it's founded, but that's what they are talking about. So
wow, watch this space, hey? We'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Oh, great. I was going to ask you so many more questions. I'm like, what is my daughter? But I think we'll just cut it. Otherwise, we'll be here for another hour. Thank you so much. Is there anything you want to share before I close that I might not have asked about, but you think super significant to be aware of or deserves a mention?
Oh boy, I think it's good to, if you leave this and you're really interested or you're offended, because I don't speak on behalf of all millennials. It's fair enough to be offended. I encourage people to like research a little bit on generational theory. It's not all hogwash. Like I said, there are actual studies that are being done on social groups to determine, different things like how their identity forms, and we're always learning about society. So if you're interested, definitely, or you'd like to challenge yourself, just have a little bit of, a look online and see sort of what they're saying. I think with millennials, time will tell whether or not this whole idea of I must find a purpose and I must live my purpose sticks or not, because again, we're all kind of at a very interesting age where we could realize that is probably a false dream or something. But yeah, just I forgot his name. There is a really great interview. I think it's Sinek. Do you know that interview? No.
Don't put me on the spot.
Sorry. Is it Simon Sinek? I'm surely not. I think I'm screwing up the names.
Give me some
But
info.
there's a really great interview with him where he explains millennials really well and sort of defies the tropes that they have. So will the world become more accommodating for millennials? Probably not. And, we can just adjust to learning about each social wave as they come, I guess. So.
And who's more likely to take over the world, millennials or zillennials? That was just...
I don't know. Honestly, I think centennials might have the upper hand. They're just a very different, I'm even with them in some of my uni courses, and they're just a very, very different, they have completely different upbringings. So it's really cool to like mingle with them, because like we tend to disagree on a lot of things, or, they just have a completely different worldview. So it'll be really interesting. And I feel like if we were to start a war between millennials and centennials, I 100% betting that the centennials would win. So I think all new generations.
I feel that. I feel that from what you've described. So it's just a gut feeling, though. It's not a well-researched feeling. But I'm going to look at their astrology. I know that might not be your jam, but I think also because planets also change in different generations, I have a feeling there's some Sagittarius energy there. But anyway, that's my little addition to this. All right. Cool. Well, thank you so much again, Chelsea. And
that's okay.
So I look forward to hearing from people that might want to ask some questions, maybe from Chelsea or myself. Feel free to get in touch with us. I'll pop a little link if you're a friend of Chelsea's and you want to chat to her about this topic or what she shared really about her own story with oils and how to use the oils to support yourself in your own life. I'll pop a little link in the YouTube comment section, and I'll also pop a link for myself if you've watched it from my page and know me and want to get in touch how to support yourself with oils as well. But yeah, thanks very much for chatting to me this morning. And maybe next time we can chat Millennials once you've researched it further.
Yes, once they're 30 and I'm 60.
All right, I'll see you then. Thank you so much.
Ya.
Bye.
Bye.